Hello, and welcome to Chief Outsiders Growth Talks. Today's topic is harnessing AI power, best practices for dynamic growth. Please feel free to enter your questions throughout. I'm Dina Baker. I'm a fractional chief marketing officer and a partner with Chief Outsiders, and I work with organizations to help accelerate their growth, often if they have newer changing brands, complex brand families, or are seeking new paths to growth. My approach is to balance near-term goals and long-term strategy with immersion in the mission, vision, and business objectives. When it comes to AI, I'm interested in how it fits into and turbocharges the fundamental gears of marketing. With me is Ryan Burgio. I've worked with him and his digital marketing agency with two of my clients, and he's the first person I thought of to partner with me in this webinar. Ryan Burgio stands at the forefront of digital innovation as the co-founder and managing partner of Strive Digital Marketing. Boasting over 2 decades in the digital marketing realm, Ryan has witnessed and embraced every major technological shift from the rise of social media to the dawn of AI. He believes that we're on the cusp of a technological revolution that might surpass even the impact of social media on marketing. This next chapter promises to be monumental. And by the way, that description of Ryan is what he sent to me when I asked how he'd like me to introduce him. And in the spirit of this webinar, he had ChatGPT crafted. Welcome, Ryan.
Thanks for having me, Dina.
It's great to have you here. So the premise of today's discussion is that the fundamentals of marketing don't change. And Chief Outsiders has built its growth gears on those fundamentals, accelerating the growth of our clients for 15 years. Those growth gears include insights about customers, competitors, and the company itself, strategy for facing the market, for the company's offerings, for its positioning, and execution encompassing the resources, the tactics, and the metrics. But while the fundamentals don't change and are persistent, the tools do change. And with them, the speed. In my view, AI tools put the growth gears into what I would call hyperdrive. And if you're not leveraging them, you're falling behind those that do. Today, we're going to talk about a few examples and best practices for getting the most out of AI and accelerating marketing, while sticking to the fundamentals of gathering great insights, building an effective strategy based on that knowledge, and executing efficiently. So I want to start by mentioning a tool I've been using recently. It's called Perplexity, and I like it because it's a thought partner. I recently used it for a client in the insights gear and leading into the strategy gear as I turned those insights into strategic recommendations. The client itself is a startup that provides an AI-enabled product to the insurance industry, and I'm helping them with their messaging platform. It's a small, tightly scoped engagement, and they needed to nail their messaging very quickly as they went into their first big conference season. While I don't advocate in any way for shortchanging the voice of customer stage in the insights gear, the nature and timing of this work didn't give me the opportunity to do that in the usual depth. So I used Perplexity to supplement that. I asked it, what would motivate the target buyer to choose the specific type of product or not? And Perplexity not only offered an impressive response, it delivered the source materials so I could go and evaluate and judge them for myself and go deeper. And then it suggested my follow-up questions that I could ask Perplexity, and then delivered again the source materials for that. So it engaged essentially in a thought partnership dialogue that each time allowed me to go deeper. Thought partnership is key to how I work. So Perplexity is a great tool for me in turbocharging the insights and strategy gears. But the truth is, I'm much more a strategy person than an AI expert. Ryan, on the other hand, is a true AI evangelist. So I want to spend the rest of our time getting his insights. Ryan, I'll start by asking you this. You've talked to me about using AI in the execution phase to help develop thought leadership content. You mentioned treating generative AI in the way you would treat a person. Could you explain what you mean by that and maybe give an example or two?
Yes. So to me, the two most powerful words in using AI right now, particularly the generative conversational AI, is act like. It's the way I queue up every conversation with the tool, every prompt. The idea is that at your disposal, you have a tool that you can train to act in any sort of role, in any sort of manner, whenever you want. And I treat them like their particular roles in my business. Act like a copywriter with a specialization in this, this, and this. Act like an SEO expert. Act like a copywriter in a different field. The idea is that I look at every prompt and every interaction like I'm interacting and I'm building a specialist that's going to work directly with me on coming up with an output. So I'll give you an example. Recently, we were putting together a case study for a client. We actually created a prompt where we said, act like a particular type of copywriter with a specialization in this and this field. And we fully briefed in the AI like we would actually brief in a copywriter. We provided it full notes, a full content brief, links to inspiration and resources for it to use. The same way we would brief in a copywriter, we actually briefed in our AI tool. I think what's people forget is it's called artificial intelligence for a reason. It's meant to mimic actual intelligence. It's just able, the vastness of its intelligence, the roles it can be are larger and more vast than anything you've ever seen before. It's like having someone available 24/7 that can act in any way that you'd like. And I'll tell you, from briefing the AI in to talking to it, so as it was providing us outputs, we were actually talking to it. Can you change this? Can you make this tone? Like I would talk to an actual writer. The output was phenomenal. And the dialogue and the back and forth was very similar to how I would actually talk to a person. And this applies to a whole vast array of other solutions or interactions. If you train and talk to an AI and set the proper context and scope, like you would set up the scope and context for a real human being, you'd be shocked at the outputs that it can generate. So it's another tool, but it's a tool based on intelligence. So you should treat it like it has intelligence, but frame it up and train it and scope it as if you would train and scope out an individual on your team. That's the part it's very important to understand. I think we're living too much in an AI world where we're saying input, output without giving any sort of context. And so if you give bad input to an employee, you're going to get bad output. If you give bad input to an AI and don't provide good context, you're also going to get bad output. And while AI, I think, is very powerful, some of the examples of it being stale and dull tell me that you're not briefing it in the way you would brief in another human being. And that's how we treat AI. It's another tool, but it's based on intelligence, and it needs the context and the roles just like any human being would need as well, too.
It sounds to me a little, I'm going to dig in on that a little.
Sure.
It sounds to me a little bit like you're saying the best people managers are going to be the best AI managers.
Yes. You know what's interesting? My best people managers on my team were the first ones to adopt AI, which is crazy. Because you're looking at it through a different lens. It's not a traditional tool. It's I'm working with something and I'm scoping it and giving it context, and I'm patient and I'm working with it and dialoguing with it. And it's an iterative back and forth process like you'd have with a regular person. And typically your best people and managers are not, here's what you need to do, go do it. They talk, they go back and forth, they iterate, they listen, they listen to the feedback, they dialogue on it. They have a much more iterative, collaborative experience with the AI. Remember, typically, if you're using something like ChatGPT, it has full context windows that are pretty long. So you can have a conversation with it over a long period of time. It will remember a certain amount of information. You can literally say, go back to this prompt and let's talk about this, this, and this. It remembers things, it understands things, and it picks up on nuances. But if you're not giving it enough input and if you're not giving it enough flavor, you're going to get a crappy output, just like you would with a traditional employee or individual. So set up roles, set up context, tell it what you want, get it inspired, even motivated. I mean, sometimes I'll say that was fantastic. Let's keep going down that path. And it will actually say thank you and go that path. So I just feel like it's something that I'm working with every day. It's one of the screens I open up. I'm collaborating like I would collaborate with a writer or a creative director. It doesn't feel that much different. If anything, it's kind of there for me every day and when I need it as well too. So 24/7 around the clock is something my current employees shouldn't have to or can actually offer to me as well too. So
okay. Let me ask you one more question on that piece before we go on to the next question. You said talk to it like you would brief in a real person. You just suggested, you could even tell it, hey, that was fantastic. But it might be hard for people to conceive of what would one of those sentences sound like that you're going to say to an AI tool when you're asking it for something. Can you just talk to me for a moment as though I'm AI and you're trying to get something out of me?
Yeah, so I was actually, I'll try to use an example that I actually was using yesterday. So I was working on a new brand for a client, and I would say, okay, you're a professional branding expert, but I need to come up with something that is really unique and edgy for the client. Like I literally say who the client is and like what we're doing. And I'll say, combine these words, but make it cool and make it interesting. And I'll say, give me 25 answers. Right. And then it'll give me 25. Like, oh, okay, these two are really good. Let's iterate on those three as well too. Let's come up with cool. And I'll literally use language like that's really cool. I like that. Or let's take that to the next. I'll say stuff like, let's take this to the next level. It understands that. The AI actually understands it. It's trained on a massive language model, right? So I'm like, let's amp this up a bit. Let's add some flavor to this. Like, this is how I would talk to an actual individual. And it's shocking how good it's coming up with. So it gave me a few brand names, and I said, I love these three. Let's work along these parameters, and let's make it cool and edgy, and let's try to do more with it. And
so it sounds like the way you'd talk to me if we were brainstorming something.
Yeah, and also like the way you talk to it also gets your energy going, right? Because sometimes this feels a little bit too dry, the interactions. But if you put energy in, it puts energy out. You're creating more of a dynamic experience, and it's more fun. So I don't hold back on my language. It's a large language model. It should know what I'm talking about, right?
So one thing you also mentioned to me when we've spoken is that leveraging AI helps to accelerate parts of the process that you called low value and time consuming. And when I think about that, and when I think about what you just said, it may make people think that it puts professionals' jobs at risk, but my understanding is that you don't see it replacing anyone at Strive. Can you comment on that?
Yeah, well, first of all, and we'll talk more about how we use in day-to-day operations, but I think this whole narrative that's going to replace people is just going to make everyone afraid of using it. And so for me at Strive, I want to be positive. I want to be aspirational, because if you are wanting people to use it, but you're constantly talking about replacing jobs, people don't accelerate in a period of fear and uncertainty. And I think that narrative that's been spinning around AI can really push a lot of people away. I also think the first phase of this is really enabling your top people to be incredibly productive in everything they do. There's kind of two areas that happens. Day-to-day grunt work that really is low value. If you can get that out of the way of your top talent or talent in general, it's going to free them up to be more creative, to do better work and stuff like, I'll give you examples like proposal writing. If you get this down to a template and you feed an AI the proper parameters, you should be able to pump out the baselines of proposals really quickly. We spend a lot of time at Strive rehashing proposals, writing things, when frankly, feeding out an old proposal in and getting someone to just edit it, we can save a lot of time. And frankly, a lot of people don't like doing that either. Editing is a huge part where individuals are literally responsible for reviewing and QAing other people's work, and AI is much better at it. It's just much better. Feedback is different, but editing an email, asking someone to review something, if you can get an AI to do that, that only saves your time. It saves a lot of time from other individuals. If you haven't edited through AI before I edit it, then you should give it a pass through there first and foremost. So this is like daily tasks where it's not only just laborious on you, but it adds more work to everyone else around you. And it has this multiplicative effect. And I think we need to start eliminating those things, right? I'm not saying you should replace your writing, but if you're going to have to send out an email and you want to edit it for clarity and consistency, let's not waste my time. You can run it through AI first and see how you feel about it. So I think those are really clear, and they just give people more energy to the day. In general, we've implemented AI in a few different ways. So we use ChatGPT, Business Plan Plus. Everyone has access to it. I really strongly encourage everyone to use it, and I can go in and see what prompts people are writing, reward people for using it. So we're fully enabled by ChatGPT. Love it. We also use design tools like Adobe Firefly because we're a creative shop, and Midjourney. It's a lot of fun. We pay for it, and we use our allowing our creative teams to get supercharged. There's really 6 key areas. Design. So I'm getting blown away by design capabilities, literally replacing through prompt certain images and certain ways that images are using. Our design team is fully enabled. They don't feel like it's going to take their job. You still need to be creative. You still need to come up with the concepts. It's just getting it done better and faster. Writing and editing is a huge part. Outlines for blogs, creative briefs, just getting that structural framework done. We use it quite a bit. I'm using it personally for strategizing. So we're doing planning for 2024. I love Good Strategy, Bad Strategy, which is a book and a framework that I've used. So I'm using that to help guide me through my strategic planning. You can input complex tables and data through some key plugins through ChatGPT. Coding. Coding is a big part. So eliminating base level coding that we usually would go to a developer for. My design team, my account team can actually write and edit code, which is phenomenal. But I think the most important part is troubleshooting and training. So typically when you had an issue or a concern, you'd have to go find it on a third-party site, ask internally. The first layer of solving a problem should be by asking AI and validating it after that. It will save you time, it will save the team time. And second of all, training, I learn as I go. And AI to me is revolutionary because it meets you where you're at. If you want to learn something, you can literally learn while you're using AI. And so that's a key area that we're really pushing people to adopt in their day-to-day. So overall, we're leaning in heavy. We're using it across the org. But most importantly, what we're finding, as much as it's removing the day-to-day monotonous tasks, what it is enabling our people to be better, to have more time and to have more resources and support for doing actually more of the complex tasks. We believe it's going to supercharge your top level talent.
I really appreciate this perspective that values the most important contributions of marketing professionals. To me, it means it's also important to provide iterative and timely professional development for marketing staff to ensure they're really best positioned careers as AI continues to rapidly develop.
For sure. Absolutely.
So at Chief Outsiders, we work with clients in many industries, including highly regulated industries, and I know you do as well. There's a lot of fear, especially in those industries, about the risk with proprietary information when engaging with AI tools. But I believe that you've been spending a lot of your personal time experimenting with addressing that issue. Can you talk about the future you see for safely using AI in a proprietary context?
Yeah, I would suggest this doesn't just even apply to highly regulated industries. It applies, frankly, across enterprise. We're seeing a lot of pushback around AI and using AI. And furthermore, if you're a vendor that's serving those industries and you have service agreements, you have to be highly aware of violating those agreements based on sharing information. And so, what we're seeing, I'll give kind of a spectrum, and then I'll talk about defensible AI, because I actually think leveraging proprietary information is actually the key advantage for AI, is how you build your own AI systems. But we're seeing a vast, array of responses. But the big one is just shut it all down, right? No access, can't work on it. We're just going to shut this all down so we figure it out. And I get it. Like, I'm not here to say you shouldn't do that. I think there's two issues with that. Number one is your top talent is coming to expect the ability to use these tools. And if they're not using it through your own systems, they're probably finding a way to use it anyways. And so shutting it down, is not going to get rid of it, but also you're somewhat putting your employee base at a disadvantage relative to your competition. And I think it's really important to understand that from an expectations perspective, but from an output perspective, the shutdown mentality is really causing a lot of issues and will be a challenge going forward. But I think at the end of the day, when you're in a highly regulated industry, it's not about whether you use AI or not. It's about how you deploy it and how you stage it into actual full adoption. We're coming up against the situation that we're really pushing companies to at least sandbox the opportunity, to keep a tight internal team, to run internal pilots, to test and learn and understand, but in a very controlled and responsible manner, and then scale it out over time. But don't shut it down entirely. Build teams, start a steering committee, set processes and procedures, and deploy utilization of AI in a very controlled, responsible manner. We believe that is the way in which at least you'll get to experience it and understand it. And that's, to me, very important. People and employees need to understand and experience this, or they're going to be put at a disadvantage. But secondly to that, the proprietary documentation, which is really the big risk in AI, sharing information over ChatGPT, individuals violating really their privacy issues, it's also the biggest opportunity. So our interpretation of defensible AI in the future, while there are great tools and off-the-shelf solutions you can use, and they're everywhere, they're a dime a dozen, building meaningful outputs within your own organization that's based on your proprietary documentation and architecture. I'll give you an example: architecture, quality control systems, brand guidelines and tone and voice, legal reviews. You can literally build in legal review agents. The whole concept of building your own AI, and I really believe that the future is belonging to companies that build their own infrastructure using, a combination of third-party tools, Microsoft enterprise tools, that mix to generate outputs that are meaningful, that are different and cannot be accessed through ChatGPT, to be able to query your own employee handbook and understand how to apply it, to query and talk about your proprietary approach to clients or insights or information, building architecture that is able to access that and turn it around much more quickly. That, we believe, is what's called defensible AI, and that is what we believe the future to hold. Now, right now, there's a lot of challenges with doing that, but going forward, as companies adapt and evolve and test and understand, that is where AI is really going to drive a difference. To take what you do best and frame it up in a structure that's embedded in AI for your employees and your stakeholders to get meaningful outputs from that interaction.
You mentioned that, there are some challenges with that. And I would imagine one is cost. And when I think about our sort of mid-market client base, how soon do you think that's really on the horizon for that to be an affordable approach?
Well, I think Microsoft's going to have a big play in that and a say, and it depends on how quickly they can deploy. What we're finding right now is Microsoft is the lead here. Most people remember, if you can integrate AI with your actual Microsoft instance, which frankly, I know everyone does, a lot of people don't like Microsoft, but the reality is most enterprises, 95% of them, I would say, are on some instance of SharePoint, Office 365. And I know they're making big moves to integrate that right into enterprise software. The level at which they do it and the cost, right now, it's still going to be expensive. Copilot's coming out per user is going to be very expensive. I mean, the cost, data cost, and the processing costs. I mean, they're talking about using a nuclear reactor to power some of this stuff. I mean, we're still at the very costly phase. I think 2 to 5 years, you're going to see AI embedded into not only processes and systems, but into your documentation, the ability to access, understand, and clarify all of your company information in a meaningful way. So it's coming. I don't have a crystal ball. I've been wrong, but that 2 to 5 year window seems like it's things are going to really start propelling forward.
Thank you, Ryan. I think there were several key takeaways from the conversation we just had. First, Something we both talked about is that AI is best when we treat it as a thought partner, sort of treat it as another person, but someone with whom to have an iterative dialogue, and identifying tools that help us to think with them will allow AI to be most effective for us. What those tools are may differ from person to person. We each think and partner with others in our own way, but that seems like a fundamental piece. And one thing that really came out for me is that, that thing that we said earlier, that those who are best at working with other people are going to be best at working
Yes.
with AI and looking at it as another person in that team. The second key takeaway for me was that AI doesn't need to put marketing roles at risk, but instead offers an opportunity for using people at their best and skill building so people can do more and do better. And that is an optimism that I don't hear from a lot of quarters, but I think is important, because if we embrace that, we have the opportunity to really make sure it's embraced in that way. And finally, I think the takeaway for me is that you see the future of AI in private proprietary large language models built for individual companies to connect their people with their content. And this is something I can imagine spanning all of the growth gears, being leveraged for insights, for strategic direction, and marketing execution. And I think you talked about it in all of those categories. So I now want to give you the last word and say, are there any big takeaways or anything you want to add, Ryan, before we finish?
Well, I think it's really important to understand that for some people, this is scary. And I think that's really important to know. It's a new technology. It's both from a client perspective or a customer perspective or even an employee perspective. And I think without addressing those concerns and helping people through their concerns, we're not going to do this well. I think new technologies do scare people away. And I think we have to address that. But to that point, I think then we also have to talk in positive sense about enabling and supercharging and helping, because I think that's when people will lean in. And so from my standpoint, it's about making my people, my clients feel safe, being responsible in deployment, having parameters, and that will allow you to fully lean in. Because the reality is, I mean, whether we like it or not, you're either enabled by AI or you're not. And for me, I choose to lean in, throw myself into the fire, and just really embrace this. I think this is going to change things. So, enjoy it, embrace it, be responsible, be accommodating, but lean in. It's pretty powerful, and it's going to be a wild ride.
Thank you, Ryan. I really appreciate your perspective. I appreciate you joining me today. And thanks to everyone who joined us today. I hope this was of value to you.